Things about living in Ottery St Mary, most people know each other. You can wander off to the shops on a Sunday morning, take half an hour to speak to people on the way.
It's an old town that hasn't changed much over the years. I wouldn't have stayed here if it wasn't very good, would I?
We have the famous tower barrelling, when various idiotic members of the town run through the town carrying blazing barrels of tar.
Nowhere else in the world can you get 30-odd people getting taken off to hospital with burns, and it's all official and legal.
If Ottery St Mary was an animal, I think it would be something like a tiger, because it's outwardly very placid and peaceful, but it has a lot going on under the surface.
Mark Steele's in town.
Thanks very much and welcome to Mark Steele's in Town, which this week comes from Ottery St Mary, the nightclub capital of East Devon. Literally a magnet for youth, with over 5 teenagers a year spotted in the town. Each saying, we got the wrong bus, we're trying to get to Exeter. It is a small town, Ottery St Mary, with only 4 pubs, but it is eager to welcome outsiders. Even if you move here from outside the area, you're welcomed very, very quickly and accepted as an Ottery local. For a while, you might get people saying, see that Bill? He ain't no proper Ottery boy. His great-grandfather come up from Sidmouth. Dave from Tip Hill, on the other hand, I trusted him proper, then did a DNA test on him. Turns out one of his ancestors came from Honiton back in Roman times, so he's a townie after all. Give it 5 more generations, he'll be proper Ottery, see? It's fair to say that the pace of life here in Ottery St Mary, it does take a little while to adjust to if you come from the city. I rang a hotel to book a room and I said, so I'll see you about 11 then, I'll be there about 11 in the evening. And the manager said, 11? Oh dear, why so late? I said, well, I'll be in Exeter up till then I'll be leaving there about 10:30. And he said, well, you'd best get a Travelodge in Exeter then, hadn't you? Another difference in the culture that I noticed, I went in one of the cafes at exactly 20 to 3, and there was a big sign up saying soup. I said, I'll have some soup, please. And the woman said, no, you won't, not at this time of day. I thought, by mistake, did I say, good afternoon, I'm going to sit here and smoke some crack. A bit early for that. I feel like someone who accidentally goes into Papua New Guinea and upsets a tribe. They believe soup in the afternoon makes their gods angry. The first conversation I heard here was in the Curious Otter bookshop. And a man came in while I was there, and I could hear this conversation that went, have you got that book I ordered? Then there was a gap of about a minute. And the bloke said, not come in yet, Ted. And then there was another minute, and Ted said, I'll come back tomorrow then. It was like they were thinking, best leave these gaps between sentences, because if we string this dialogue out as long as possible, once it's over, we've got less of the day to kill. I did feel like a towny idiot when I asked around if there was a taxi. 3 people gave me exactly the same answer, honestly. They all said, well, there was supposed to be one outside the post office, but he's never there. I expected to be told, if you want a taxi, you're going to have to go to Exeter to get one. Don't know how you're going to get there, mind. But once you get past your city prejudices, you find areas here where it is clearly very, very lively. The Ottery Gazette, I'm sure you all know, it had a headline the first week that I came. That was, yes, the post office is still open. That was the week of the American election. But Ottery, of course, you all know this, Ottery may appear to be gentle and full of rural calm, but underneath, you're a tiger. And you love to celebrate the moments when Ottery has played a pivotal role in history, representing the jump from an old England to a new England with a series of festivals, often involving the most gloriously unnecessary risk to personal safety. For example, once a year, even by the standards of Barcelona or New York, Ottery St Mary goes berserk with a festival of tar barrels involving random acts of arson. And for people who don't know, it is a twist on a normal bonfire night, because instead of going to a bonfire, here, the bonfire comes to you. At high speed, carried on someone's back in a barrel. Now, we have got some tar barrelers, as they're known in tonight, so we will be talking about the fires later on the off chance that they can resist their instincts and not burn down the hall. Now, I first came across this mixture of quiet on the surface and bonkers underneath in the tourist centre. I noticed that you could buy these table mats with a lovely picture of a man carrying a flaming barrel of tar. So I said to Phyllis, who works there, I said, "Oh, I like your table mats." And she said, "They're not table mats, they're mouse mats for a computer." I said, "Oh, right, but you could use them as table mats." And she went, "Well, you've started up a controversy there." And I was in love with the place there, because I do love a tourist centre that is not afraid to argue with tourists. There's more to Ottery, of course, than just the town centre. There's a little suburb of Ottery St Mary called West Hill. Up the hill where the posh new houses are. Up on a hill so that they can look down on you. And every now and again they must go, "What are they doing down there?" "Oh my God, they're setting things alight. Quick, wake the children and put them in the Range Rover. We'll be back in London by the morning." It is amazing how much history there is generally in this area. For example, there's a house called Raleigh House with a plaque that says, "There is conjecture that Sir Walter Raleigh may have lived here." That's top marks for Keane, isn't it? Putting up plaques to people on the grounds that there's conjecture they may have lived there. You sit around each other's houses going, "Do you reckon Beethoven ever lived here?" "Might, don't I suppose." "Well, that's enough conjecture. Stick a plaque up." In part, I'm sure you all know this whole area originally was shaped by the Danes, which is explained in this book, A Child's History of Exeter, that I got. This area was invaded 3 times in the 10th century by the Danes. And apparently, according to this book, the 3rd time it happened, the people of this area said, "Oh no, not the Danes again, surely." Do you think that's right? Can't we be pillaged by someone new? In a way, even the boundaries of the parish contain the contradiction of Ottery St Mary, the mix of calm Devon town with this fiery, excitable tradition underneath, because the borders were set by parish officials. And according to my History of the Town by John Whittam, in the Middle Ages, it was the duty of parish officials to walk round the boundaries annually to bless the crops, accompanied by local boys who were bounced on the stones, whipped, ducked in ponds and stood on their heads at landmarks so they would remember the boundaries for future generations. Maps? Nah, they're overrated. There's a song that celebrates the great events of Ottery through the centuries. A cheerful little song called The Ballad of Tilly Hake. This is how it starts. "Tilly went walking in Ottery one day and saw a fine soldier on the highway. The boys all marched to the sound of the drum, but their mothers' hearts break before the battle is won." I thought, well, that's a bit of a sad start. Oh, here's the chorus. That'll lighten the mood. "We need dreams, we need bread, for we'll soon all be dead." It was written by Morrissey. "We'll all be dead, 'cause we're sick in the head." The next verse goes, "Tilly went walking in Ottery one day and saw a black crow upon the highway. The cholera crow has come to town and death walks beside him in a silken gown." Well, read the next one. Probably go, "Tilly went walking by the tumbling weir and saw a fine picture of a bonfire night here." What a sweet table mat, Tilly then said. It's a mouse mat, screamed the painter, and bashed Tilly dead. Now, there is one custom here that doesn't depend on burning everything in the vicinity. Apparently, when Christianity was introduced into the area in the 6th century, the local pixies were upset. As the pagan beliefs that they were part of weren't believed in anymore. And these imaginary creatures were so annoyed, especially when the bells were installed in the church, that the pixies took the local monks hostage, put them in a trance and marched them towards a cliff. And then the monks were just about to jump off when one of the monks stubbed his toe, shouted, "Oh my God and St Mary!" and that broke the spell. And then the pixies ran off and hid in a cave that is now called Pixie's Parlour. And every year on Pixie Day, this episode is reenacted on Broad Street with children dressed as pixies trying to capture the church bell ringers. And you wonder why people from the city think you're nuts. Even as a piece of folklore, it makes no sense. When the monks first told this story, did they go, "We've just been captured"? Who by? By things we don't believe in. Well, why did they capture you? For not believing in them. Well, you must believe in them now. No, we don't. They nearly threw us off a cliff. Any visitor that comes to Ottery St Mary, if they're very observant, they will notice that it's quite rural here, and there is the odd patch of farming. Now, I personally would be utterly useless on a farm. I'd be trying to milk the apples and plant the pigs. But I read this book by a local farmer, Journey into Farming by John Carter. He describes his farmhand, Nigel, in there. One day, he was painting a garage roof and slid down the side he'd just painted onto the grass. To get rid of the paint, he smothered himself in diesel fuel and rolled on the lawn, killing the grass. The next day, he smelt so bad, we set fire to his mattress. What a combination that is. Frank Spencer and someone from Ottery who thinks the answer to everything is to set fire to things. I slid down the roof and killed the grass. We better burn everything then. Ottery hasn't just been affected by events, it's also helped create them, such as when you had an impact on the future of writing and the French Revolution, because in 1772, as I'm sure everybody here knows, this was where the poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge was born and then brought up. And not that you make a fuss about it, of course. Apart from the hoarding in Broad Street telling of each building in the town he was ever in, and the stones in the park spelling out the poem Kubla Khan, and half the church dedicated to him, and plaques and pamphlets about him all round the tourist office by the table mouse mat. You keep it pretty quiet. Right? It's very Ottery St Mary, the fascination with Coleridge, because he was an opium addict. And... because you make out that you're all tea shops and ancient weathercocks, but your all-time hero was a junkie. Even the doctor's surgery is called the Coleridge Medical Centre. Doctor, I've got a bit of a stiff neck. Better have some opium. I can understand why you must be proud at spawning one of the great English poets, and Coleridge certainly remembered his childhood in Ottery St Mary and wrote about it quite a bit. For example, in a published letter he described his time here. "I was fretful and timorous and used to lie by the wall and mope." In another letter he recalls his days in the town equally fondly. He says, "In my time there I was very miserable." And the tourist leaflets, I would imagine, identify these spots, saying, "This is the wall where he moped. This is where he was miserable." And then came an incident that affected his whole life. Coleridge asked his mum for some cheese, which his mum gave him, but his brother swiped the cheese off him. So Coleridge and his brother started fighting, and his mum came in just at the time that Coleridge had picked up a knife. So she blamed him for the squabble, and it is said that Coleridge then ran off and hid in the Pixie's Parlour cave for the night. And it said that he carved his initials in the wall while he was there, and so people go down there now and they carve their initials in the wall, in the tradition of Coleridge. I went down there today, I noticed somebody's written Asbo on the wall. Which I think in his way is what Coleridge would have wanted. But Coleridge was only about 7. This is the moment where, in a way, you find out what sort of person someone's going to be. Because, for example, I ran away when I was about 11, and I got to the woods, and I got to the point where you think, oh, I want to be warm. Oh, no, I'm freezing and hungry, and all I've got to do is accept humiliating surrender, and I can be warm. It will have shocked them because I've been away so long. And then I got back and they said, oh, you've been out? I thought you were in your room. But Coleridge stayed out all night with the whole town searching for him and town criers going to neighbouring towns and getting them to come out. Up West Hill maybe, to get them to come out in their Land Rovers. And Coleridge was 9 when he left here, when his father died, but he never forgot his roots. He came back in 1791 when he was 18, and he said, with great affection, the manner of the inhabitants annihilated whatever tender idea of pleasure I had. He even wrote a poem about his love for the church music of Ottery, wondering, who inspires each throat to sing such a screech owl note? Even though he lived in Bristol and all his family were here, he didn't bring his wife to Ottery for the first year of his marriage. Now, to be fair to you, I think this isn't Ottery's fault. This is pretty much Coleridge being moany, as far as I can see. Because I can't help thinking there was an air of snobbery about him at this point, especially towards his hometown, because he thought, oh, I'll go in a pub like the Volunteer with Southey and Wordsworth, and then someone will go, hey up, young Sam! Do you remember when we all went looking for you because you'd had that argument about cheese? Crying and sobbing you were. Yes, I do remember. Well, I'm now a seminal founding member of the Romantic Poets Society. Yeah, I tell you, there's nothing romantic about that day. Stunk like a donkey's arse, you did. But by now he'd met the poet Robert Southey, and together they planned a society of equality called Pantisocracy. Now, some of their ideas would seem radical now. Coleridge said that women should be relieved of domestic chores, explaining, let married women do only what is convenient and let husbands do the rest. And as this is the town of Coleridge, I'm sure that's exactly what happens here. So if you get a bunch of tourists here on a coach trip that books up for a Coleridge guided tour, you can say, today we're going to follow in the steps of Coleridge by becoming feminist revolutionary activists, followed by light refreshments of heroin, before banging on the church door, shouting, shut up, then declaring, I can't stand it here, and taking everyone to Torquay. The Coleridge family have continued ever since as prominent characters in the town, often expressing the Ottery spirit. For example, in 1927, the Honourable Geoffrey Duke Coleridge wrote, the thing that strikes me most about Ottery is when a thing has to be done, it doesn't have to be done for an hour and needn't be done for a day. And a week can go by. And it doesn't actually matter if it's never done at all. I think that's lovely and satisfying, isn't it? Probably a bit frustrating if you've had a heart attack and you're waiting for the paramedics. Now, it turns out my wife's grandfather was brought up here until he left in the 1920s, and we found a poem that he wrote after he moved up north that went, since moving north I often dream of fresh-baked scones and clotted cream. They've no idea up here, 'twould seem, the stuff they offer makes me scream. Now that, Coleridge, is a poem. The world of clotted cream, apparently, is divided between the Devon and Cornwall brands. So, are you familiar with that? Do you reckon you could tell the difference between a Devon and Cornwall clotted cream? Well, the main company producing Devon clotted cream, apparently, was called Definitely Devon. And then, do you know what Definitely Devon did? It moved to Cornwall. puts Judas in the shade for treachery, doesn't it? It's like if UKIP moved its headquarters to Brussels. Now, I've always thought that a green tea isn't so much a meal as a piece of culture. You know, people discuss the crumbliness of a scone. 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 You say scone here. Right, I want you to... right, cheer for scone. And now cheer for scone.
West Hill.
What about the cream on top or the jam on top? The cream first? And here is the news. It seems that a radio recording in Ottery St Mary has broken out into a mass brawl. Now, mostly, of course, this is a town that prides itself in its celebrations every November the 5th. The point of the evening is to take barrels that have been specially marinated in tar, and then someone in the barrel committee carefully lights it until flames shoot out of the middle and you can't even see the barrel. It's just a ball of fire, and then a carrier puts it on the back of the neck and goes, "Rah!" and runs into the middle of a massive crowd. And when it comes towards you, everybody screams as if to say, I suppose on reflection a whizzing fireball is a hazard. And I can honestly say from experience that the nearer it comes to you, the more fun it is. There was a bald bloke next to me. He was about as excited as anyone I've ever seen doing anything. At one point he went, "It burnt my head, it did!" And he turned to me, he said, "Feel that? It's burnt my head!" I met one barrel runner and he said to me, "Take a look at my neck." And it was all covered in these sort of big blisters and scars. I said, "Is that from this year's barrels?" He went, "Oh no, that's from years ago." All the burning embers fall down your shirt, it's all part of it. Part of the celebration involves cannon being fired throughout the day. And I have to say, the pictures I've seen of lines of men in the woods firing into the air do look strangely like the sort of photos used as evidence against criminals at The Hague. Nelson Owen, who helped run the event for years, said about the cannon, "We were always careful to guard the gunpowder as we were fully aware of the risk, so it was kept in a biscuit tin." It's like health and safety gone mad, isn't it? So there'll have been houses where people went, "These custard creams are a bit spicy." Yesterday, Nigel the farmhand had a ginger nut. Lit fag, exploded. We've had to set fire to his bed again. But the amazing thing when you're there in the crowd is how quickly you get used to it. At first you think, "What the hell is he's running at me with a flaming barrel?" And after about half an hour you become part of it and you're chatting to someone next to you, and then every now and again you go, "Oh, better mind out, there's a swirling cauldron of flame coming towards me." And lots of the shops stay open through all of this. The solicitors was open, I know. There are people walking around with clipboards going, "Have you been involved in an accident in the last 15 minutes? And there's a variety of barrels through the night. So there's a children's part of the event, because what could be more suitable for a child? This is the only town where parents say to their kids, "What have I told you about playing with fire? You're 7 years old, you should have started by now." So at this point, I'd like to introduce Martin. So how old are you now, Martin?
Just 16.
16, and you were at what age when you started?
7.
A veteran barrel roller. So is it it's a big thing to be at school the next day running with a barrel?
I feel like a hero.
Yeah?
You don't really know what's going on, except you've got this big hot barrel on your back, you've got to run, well, like an idiot, basically. But then when you go up to the bigger intermediate ones, you feel a bit, "Oh no, I've got to try and pick this up now. I'm going to have 7 other people trying to rip it off me."
So there's an element of competition in it then?
Yes, there is. Everyone's trying to nick it off each other, trying to have a laugh with it, basically.
I certainly thought when I was watching it, it's got far more claims to be an Olympic sport than dressage. Thanks very much, guys. Well, it was one of the most brilliant nights. I won't recommend it to everyone for reasons I'm going to come on to, because here's what I love most about it, really. In the programme that you can buy for the event, it says, "Don't come to the barrel burning if you're going to complain that you don't feel safe." What a refreshing attitude, because it's not like you're putting on a do for tourists. You're doing it because you want to do it, and you're going to do it anyway because you're mad, and that's what makes it a brilliant night. The Ottery Gazette said before the carnival, "No doubt the public will attend in their thousands, though hopefully not as many as in previous years." I love the way this is the only festival that wants to keep tourists away. I bet the tourist board meet up here and go, "What a successful season we've had. Only 9 people come all year. Hopefully next year we can get it down to no one." And this is a feeling that I believe has maybe been inherited through generations of Otteryness, that you'll do what you always do, and if anyone comes from outside, they are quite welcome to join in, but you're not going to pretend. So, before I'd finish, I'd like to thank the King's School, where we all are here, which I imagine is the only school where you get expelled for not burning it down. And I think it is fitting that Ottery is the home of one of the Romantic poets, principled, in love with imagination, and who wrote these lines. And I'll leave you with this, Coleridge on Ottery St Mary. "From France I hear liberty scream like an actor, reaching for Ottery to catch me off guard. But lo, it got stuck behind a huge tractor. And so it still waits by the turn-off from Chard. Yet here's where I learnt to pursue truth when I'm able. Like that's for a mouse, not a map for a table. So let angels descend on this Devon town soon, as long as they don't ask for soup afternoon. And we'll welcome the angels with grand salutations, as soon as they've been here for 7 or 8 generations."
Mark Steele's In Town was written and performed by Mark Steele with additional material by Pete Sinclair. The producer was Sam Bryan.